Accordingly the fisherman went away by night, and coming to the lake threw in his nets betimes next morning, took 4 fish like the former, and brought them to the vizier at the hour appointed. The minister took them himself, carried them to the kitchen, and shutting himself up with the cook, she cleaned them and put them on the fire. When they were fried on one side, and she had turned them upon the other, the kitchen wall again opened, and the same lady came in with the rod in her hand, struck one of the fish, spoke to it as before, and all 4 gave her the same answer. After they had spoken to the young lady, she overturned the frying pan with her rod and retired into the wall. The Grand Vizier being witness to what had passed, "This is too wonderful and extraordinary," said he, "to be concealed from the Sultan. I will inform him of this prodigy." The Sultan, being much surprised, sent immediately for the fisherman, and said to him, "Friend, cannot you bring me 4 more such fish?" The fisherman replied, "If your Majesty will be pleased to allow me 3 days, I will do it." Having obtained his time, he went to the lake immediately, and at the first throwing in of his net, he caught 4 fish, and brought them directly to the Sultan, who was so much the more rejoiced, as he did not expect them so soon, and ordered him 400 pieces of gold. As soon as the Sultan had the fish, he ordered them to be carried into his closet, with all that was necessary for frying them, and having shut himself up with the vizier, the minister cleaned them, put them into the pan, and when they were fried on one side, turned them upon the other. Then the wall of the closet opened, but instead of the young lady, there came out a black, in the habit of a slave, and of a gigantic stature, with a great green staff in his hand. He advanced toward the pan, and touching one of the fish with his staff, said with a terrible voice, "Fish, are you in your duty?" At these words the fish raised up their heads and answered, "Yes, yes, we are. If you reckon, we reckon. If you pay your debts, we pay ours. If you fly, we overcome and are content." The fish had no sooner finished these words than the black threw the pan into the middle of the closet and reduced them to a coal. Having done this, he retired fiercely, and entering again into the aperture, it closed, and the wall appeared just as it did before. "After what I have seen," said the Sultan to the vizier, "it will not be possible for me to be easy. These fish without doubt signify something extraordinary." He sent for the fisherman, and when he came, said to him, "Fisherman, the fish you have brought us make me very uneasy. Where did you catch them?" "Sir," answered he, "I fished for them in a lake situated betwixt 4 hills beyond the mountain that we see from hence." "Knowest thou not that lake?" said the Sultan to the vizier. "No," replied the vizier, "I never so much as heard of it, although I have for 60 years hunted beyond that mountain." The Sultan asked the fisherman how far the lake might be from the palace. The fisherman answered it was not above 3 hours' journey. Upon this assurance the Sultan commanded all his court to take horse, and the fisherman served them for a guide. They all ascended the mountain, and at the foot of it they saw, to their great surprise, a vast plain that nobody had observed till then, and at last they came to the lake, which they found to be situated betwixt 4 hills, as the fisherman had described. The water was so transparent that they observed all the fish to be like those which the fisherman had brought to the palace. The Sultan stood upon the bank of the lake, and after beholding the fish with admiration, demanded of his courtiers if it were possible they had never seen this lake, which was within so short a distance of the town. They all answered that they had never so much as heard of it. "Since you all agree that you never heard of it," said the Sultan, "and as I am no less astonished than you are at this novelty, I am resolved not to return to my palace till I learn how this lake came here, and why all the fish in it are of 4 colors. Having spoken thus, he ordered his court to encamp, and immediately his pavilion and the tents of his household were planted upon the banks of the lake. When night came, the Sultan retired under his pavilion and spoke to the Grand Vizier thus, "Vizier, my mind is uneasy, this lake transported hither, the black that appeared to us in my closet, and the fish that we heard speak. All these things so much excite my curiosity that I cannot resist my impatient desire to have it satisfied. To this end I am resolved to withdraw alone from the camp, and I order you to keep my absence secret. Stay in my pavilion, and tomorrow morning, when the emirs and courtiers come to attend my levee, send them away, and tell them that I am somewhat indisposed and wish to be alone. And the following days tell them the same thing, till I return." The Grand Vizier endeavoured to divert the Sultan from this design. He represented to him the danger to which he might be exposed, and that all his labour might perhaps be in vain. But it was to no purpose. The Sultan was resolved. He put on a suit fit for walking and took his scimitar, and as soon as he found that all was quiet in the camp, went out alone and passed over one of the hills without much difficulty. He found the descent still more easy, and when he came to the plain, walked on till the sun arose, and then he saw before him, at a considerable distance, a vast building. He rejoiced at the sight, in hopes of receiving there the information he sought. When he drew near, he found it was a magnificent palace, or rather a strong castle, of black polished marble, and covered with fine steel, as smooth as glass. Being highly pleased that he had so speedily met with something worthy his curiosity, he stopped before the front of the castle, and considered it with attention. He then advanced toward the gate, which had 2 leaves, one of them open, though he might immediately have entered, yet he thought it best to knock. This he did at first softly, and waited for some time, but seeing no one, and supposing he had not been heard, he knocked harder the second time, and after that he knocked again and again, but no one yet appearing, he was exceedingly surprised, for he could not think that a castle in such repair was without inhabitants. "If there be no one in it," said he to himself, "I have nothing to fear, and if it be inhabited, I have wherewith to defend myself." At last he entered, and when he came within the porch, he cried, "Is there no one here to receive a stranger who comes in for some refreshment as he passes by?" He repeated the same words 2 or 3 times, but though he spoke very loud, he was not answered. The silence increased his astonishment. He came into a spacious court, and looked on every side for inhabitants, but discovered none. Perceiving nobody in the court, he entered the grand halls, which were hung with silk tapestry, the alcoves and sofas covered with stuffs of Mecca, and the porches with the richest stuffs of India. He came afterward into a superb saloon, in the middle of which was a fountain, with a lion of massy gold at each angle. Water issued from the mouths of the 4 lions, and as it fell, formed diamonds and pearls resembling a jet d'eau, which, springing from the middle of the fountain, rose nearly to the top of a cupola, painted in arabesque. The castle on 3 sides was encompassed by a garden, with parterres of flowers and shrubbery, and to complete the beauty of the place, an infinite number of birds filled the air with their harmonious notes, and always remained there, nets being spread over the garden and fastened to the palace to confine them. The Sultan walked from apartment to apartment, where he found everything rich and magnificent. Being tired with walking, he sat down in a veranda, which had a view over the garden, reflecting upon what he had seen, when suddenly he heard the voice of one complaining in lamentable tones. He listened with attention, and heard distinctly these words, "O Fortune! Thou who wouldst not suffer me longer to enjoy a happy lot, forbear to persecute me, and by a speedy death put an end to my sorrows. Alas! Is it possible that I am still alive, after so many torments as I have suffered?" The Sultan rose up, advanced toward the place whence he heard the voice, and coming to the door of a great hall, opened it, and saw a handsome young man, richly habited, seated upon a throne raised a little above the ground. Melancholy was painted on his countenance. The Sultan drew near and saluted him. The young man returned his salutation by an inclination of his head, not being able to rise, at the same time saying, "My lord, I should rise to receive you, but am hindered by sad necessity, and therefore hope you will not be offended." "My lord," replied the Sultan, "I am much obliged to you for having so good an opinion of me. As to the reason of your not rising, whatever your apology be, I heartily accept it. Being drawn hither by your complaints, and afflicted by your grief, I come to offer you my help. I flatter myself that you will relate to me the history of your misfortunes, but inform me first of the meaning of the lake near the palace, where the fish are of 4 colors. Whose castle is this? How you came to be here? And why you are alone?" Instead of answering these questions, the young man began to weep bitterly. "How inconstant is fortune!" cried he. "She takes pleasure to pull down those she has raised. Where are they who enjoy quietly the happiness which they hold of her, and whose day is always clear and serene?" The Sultan, moved with compassion to see him in such a condition, prayed him to relate the cause of his excessive grief. "Alas, my lord," replied the young man, "how is it possible but I should grieve, and my eyes be inexhaustible fountains of tears?" At these words, lifting up his robe, he showed the Sultan that he was a man only from the head to the girdle, and that the other half of his body was black marble. The Sultan was much surprised when he saw the deplorable condition of the young man. "That which you show me," said he, "while it fills me with horror, excites my curiosity, so that I am impatient to hear your history, which no doubt must be extraordinary, and I am persuaded that the lake and the fish make some part of it. Therefore I conjure you to relate it. You will find some comfort in so doing, since it is certain that the unfortunate find relief in making known their distress." "I will not refuse your request," replied the young man, "though I cannot comply without renewing my grief. But I give you notice beforehand to prepare your ears, your mind, and even your eyes, for things which surpass all that the imagination can conceive." The History of the Young King of the Black Isles. "You must know, my lord," said the wretched prisoner, "that my father, named Mahmud, was monarch of this country. This is the kingdom of the Black Isles, which takes its name from the 4 small neighboring mountains, for those mountains were formerly isles, and the capital where the king my father resided was situated on the spot now occupied by the lake you have seen. The sequel of my history will inform you of the reason for those changes. The king my father died when he was 70 years of age. I had no sooner succeeded him than I married, and the lady I chose to share the royal dignity with me was my cousin. I had so much reason to be satisfied with her affection, and on my part loved her with so much tenderness, that nothing could surpass the harmony of our union. This lasted 5 years, at the end of which time I perceived the Queen ceased to delight in my attentions. One day after dinner, while she was at the bath, I found myself inclined to repose, and lay down upon a sofa. 2 of her ladies, who were then in my chamber, came and sat down, one at my head and the other at my feet, with fans in their hands to moderate the heat, and to prevent the flies from disturbing me. They thought I was asleep, and spoke in whispers, but as I only closed my eyes, I heard all their conversation. One of them said to the other, "Is not the Queen wrong, not to love so amiable a prince?" "Certainly," replied her companion. "I do not understand the reason, neither can I conceive why she goes out every night and leaves him alone. Is it possible that he does not perceive it?" "Alas," said the first, "how should he? She mixes every evening in his liquor the juice of a certain herb, which makes him sleep so sound all night that she has time to go where she pleases, and as day begins to appear she comes and wakes him by the smell of something she puts under his nostrils." You may guess, my lord, how much I was surprised at this conversation, and with what sentiments it inspired me. Yet whatever emotion it excited, I had sufficient self-command to dissemble, and feigned to awake without having heard a word. The Queen returned from the bath, we supped together, and she presented me with a cup full of such liquid as I was accustomed to drink. But instead of putting it to my mouth, I went to a window that was open, threw out the water so quickly that she did not perceive it, and returned. Soon after, believing that I was asleep, she arose with so little precaution that she whispered loud enough for me to hear her distinctly, "Sleep on, and may you never wake again." And so saying, she dressed herself and went out of the chamber. As soon as the Queen, my wife, was gone, I arose in haste, took my scimitar, and followed her so quickly that I soon heard the sound of her feet before me, and then walked softly after her. She passed through several gates which opened upon her pronouncing some magical words, and the last she opened was that of the garden which she entered. I stopped at this gate that she might not perceive me as she passed along a parterre. Then, looking after her as far as the darkness of the night permitted, I saw her enter a little wood, whose walks were guarded by thick palisadoes. I went thither by another way, and concealing myself, I saw her walking there with a man. I did not fail to lend the most attentive ear to their discourse, and heard her address herself thus to her gallant. "I do not deserve," she said, "to be reproached by you for want of diligence. You well know the reason, but if all the proofs of affection I have already given you be not sufficient to convince you of my sincerity, I am ready to give you others more decisive. You need but command me. You know my power. I will, if you desire it, before sunrise convert this great city and this superb palace into frightful ruins, inhabited only by wolves, owls, and ravens. If you would have me transport all the stones of those walls so solidly built beyond Mount Caucasus, the bounds of the habitable world, speak but the word, and all shall be changed." As the Queen finished this speech, she and her companion came to the end of the walk, turned to enter another, and passed before me. I had already drawn my scimitar, and the man being next me, I struck him on the neck, and brought him to the ground. I concluded I had killed him, and therefore retired speedily without making myself known to the Queen, whom I chose to spare because she was my kinswoman. The wound I had given her companion was mortal, but by her enchantments she preserved him in an existence in which he could not be said to be either dead or alive. As I crossed the garden to return to the palace, I heard the Queen loudly lamenting, and judging by her cries how much she was grieved, I was pleased that I had spared her life. As soon as I had reached my apartment, I went to bed, and being satisfied with having punished the villain who had injured me, fell asleep. Next morning I arose, went to my closet, and dressed myself. I afterward held my council. At my return, the Queen, clad in mourning, her hair dishevelled and part of it torn off, presented herself before me, and said, "I come to beg your Majesty not to be surprised to see me in this condition. My heavy affliction is occasioned by intelligence of 3 distressing events which I have just received." "Alas! What are they, madam?" said I. "The death of the Queen, my dear mother," she replied, "that of the King, my father, killed in battle, and one of my brothers, who has fallen down a precipice." I was not displeased that she used these pretexts to conceal the true cause of her grief. "Madam," said I, "so far from blaming, I assure you I heartily commiserate your sorrow. I should feel surprise if you were insensible to such heavy calamities. Weep on. Your tears are so many proofs of your tenderness, but I hope that time and reflection will moderate your grief." She retired into her apartment, where, giving herself wholly up to sorrow, she spent a whole year in mourning and lamentation. At the end of that period, she begged permission to erect a burying place for herself within the bounds of the palace, where she would continue, she told me, to the end of her days. I consented, and she built a stately edifice, and called it the Palace of Tears. When it was finished, she caused the object of her care to be conveyed thither. She had hitherto prevented his dying by potions which she had administered to him, and she continued to convey them to him herself every day after he came to the Palace of Tears. Yet with all her enchantments she could not cure the wretch. He was not only unable to walk or support himself, but had also lost the use of his speech, and exhibited no sign of life except in his looks. Every day the Queen made him 2 long visits. I was well apprised of this, but pretended ignorance. One day my curiosity induced me to go to the Palace of Tears to observe how my consort employed herself, and from a place where she could not see me I heard her thus address the wounded ruffian. "I am afflicted to the highest degree to behold you in this condition," she cried. "I am as sensible as yourself of the tormenting pain you endure. But, dear soul, I am continually speaking to you, and you do not answer me. How long will you remain silent? Speak only one word. Alas! The sweetest moments of my life are these I spend here in partaking of your grief." At these words, which were several times interrupted by her sighs, I lost all patience, and discovering myself, came up to her and said, "Madam, you have wept enough. It is time to give over this sorrow which dishonours us both. You have too much forgotten what you owe to me and to yourself." "Sire," said she, "if you have any kindness or compassion for me left, I beseech you to put no restraint upon me. Allow me to indulge my grief, which it is impossible for time to assuage." When I perceived that my remonstrance, instead of restoring her to a sense of duty, served only to increase her anguish, I ceased speaking and retired. She continued every day to visit her charge, and for 2 whole years abandoned herself to grief and despair. I went a second time to the Palace of Tears. While she was there, I concealed myself again and heard her thus cry out, "It is now 3 years since you spoke one word to me. You answer not the proofs I give you of my devotion by my sighs and lamentations. Is it from insensibility or contempt? O tomb, tell me by what miracle thou becamest the depository of the rarest treasure the world ever contained." I must confess, my lord, I was enraged by these expressions, for in truth this adored mortal was by no means what you would imagine him to have been. He was a black Indian, one of the original natives of this country. I was so enraged at the language addressed to him that I discovered myself, and, apostrophizing the tomb in my turn, I cried, "O tomb, why dost thou not swallow up that monster so revolting to human nature? Or rather, why dost thou not swallow up this pair of monsters?" I had scarcely uttered these words when the Queen, who sat by the black, rose up like a fury. "Miscreant," said she, "thou art the cause of my grief. Do not think I am ignorant of this. I have dissembled too long. It was thy barbarous hand that brought the object of my fondness into this lamentable condition, and thou hast the cruelty to come and insult me." "Yes," said I in a rage, "it was I who chastised that monster according to his desert. I ought to have treated thee in the same manner. I now repent that I did not. Thou hast too long abused my goodness." As I spoke these words I drew out my scimitar and lifted up my hand to punish her. But regarding me steadfastly, she said with a jeering smile, "Moderate thine anger." At the same time she pronounced words I did not understand, and afterward added, "By virtue of my enchantments I command thee to become half marble and half man." Immediately, my lord, I became what you see, a dead man among the living, and a living man among the dead. After this cruel sorceress, unworthy of the name of queen, had metamorphosed me thus, and brought me into this hall, by another enchantment she destroyed my capital, which was very flourishing and populous. She annihilated the houses, the public places and markets, and reduced the site of the whole to the lake and desert plain you have seen. The fishes of 4 colours in the waters are the 4 kinds of inhabitants, of different religions, which the city contained. The white are the Mussulmans, the red the Persians who worship fire, the blue the Christians, and the yellow the Jews. The 4 little hills were the 4 islands that gave name to this kingdom. I learned all this from the enchantress, who, to add to my affliction, related to me these effects of her rage. But this is not all. Her revenge not being satisfied with the destruction of my dominions and the metamorphosis of my person, she comes every day and gives me over my naked shoulders 100 lashes with a whip, until I am covered with blood. When she has finished this part of my punishment, she throws over me a coarse stuff of goat's hair, and over that this robe of brocade, not to honour but to mock me." When he came to this part of his narrative, the young king could not restrain his tears, and the Sultan was himself so affected by the relation that he could not find utterance for any words of consolation. Shortly after, the young king, lifting up his eyes to heaven, exclaimed, "Mighty Creator of all things, I submit myself to thy judgments and to the decrees of thy providence. I endure my calamities with patience, since it is thy will that things should be as they are, but I hope that thy infinite goodness will ultimately reward me." The Sultan, greatly moved by the recital of this affecting story, and anxious to avenge the sufferings of the unfortunate prince, said to him, "Inform me whither this perfidious sorceress retires, and where may be found the vile wretch who is entombed before his death." "My lord," replied the prince, "the Indian, as I have already told you, is lodged in the Palace of Tears, in a superb tomb constructed in the form of a dome. This palace joins the castle on the side in which the gate is placed. As to the queen, I cannot tell you precisely whither she retires, but every day at sunrise she goes to visit her charge, after having executed her bloody vengeance upon me. And you see I am not in a condition to defend myself. She carries to him the potion with which she has hitherto prevented his dying, and always complains of his never having spoken to her since he was wounded." "Prince," said the Sultan, "your condition can never be sufficiently deplored. No one can be more sensibly affected by your misfortune than I am. Never did anything so extraordinary befall any man. One thing only is wanting, the revenge to which you are entitled, and I will omit nothing in my power to effect it." In his subsequent conversation with the young prince, the Sultan told him who he was, and for what purpose he had entered the castle, and afterward informed him of a mode of revenge which he had devised. They agreed upon the measures they were to take for accomplishing their design, but deferred the execution of it till the following day. In the meantime, the night being far spent, the Sultan took some rest, but the young prince passed the night as usual without sleep, never having slept since he was enchanted. Next morning the Sultan arose with the dawn, and prepared to execute his design by proceeding to the Palace of Tears. He found it lighted up with an infinite number of flambeaux of white wax, and perfumed by a delicious scent issuing from several censers of fine gold of admirable workmanship. As soon as he perceived the bed where the Indian lay, he drew his scimitar, and deprived him of his wretched life, dragged his corpse into the court of the castle, and threw it into a well. After this he went and lay down in the black's bed, placed his scimitar under the covering, and waited to complete his design. The queen arrived shortly after. She first went into the chamber of her husband, the king of the Black Islands, stripped him, and with unexampled barbarity gave him 100 stripes. The unfortunate prince filled the palace with his lamentations, and conjured her in the most affecting tone to take pity on him, but the cruel wretch ceased not till she had given the usual number of blows. "You had no compassion," said she, "and you are to expect none from me." After the enchantress had given her husband 100 blows with the whip, she put on again his covering of goat's hair and his brocade gown over all. She went afterward to the Palace of Tears, and as she entered renewed her tears and lamentations. Then, approaching the bed where she thought the Indian lay, "Alas," said she, addressing herself to the Sultan, conceiving him to be the black, "my son, my life, will you always be silent? Are you resolved to let me die without affording me the comfort of hearing your voice?" The Sultan, as if he had awaked out of a deep sleep, and counterfeiting the pronunciation of the blacks, answered the queen with a grave tone, "There is no strength or power but in God alone, who is almighty." At these words the enchantress, who did not expect them, uttered a loud exclamation of joy. "My dear lord," cried she, "do I not deceive myself? Is it certain that I hear you, and that you speak to me?"
"Unhappy woman," said the Sultan, "art thou worthy that I should answer thee?"
"Alas," replied the Queen, "why do you reproach me thus?"
"The cries," returned the Sultan, "the groans and tears of thy husband, whom thou treatest every day with so much indignity and barbarity, prevent my sleeping night or day. Hadst thou disenchanted him, I should long since have been cured, and have recovered the use of my speech. This is the cause of my silence of which you complain."
"Well," said the enchantress, "to pacify you I am ready to execute your commands. Would you have me restore him?"
"Yes," replied the Sultan. "Make haste to set him at liberty, that I be no longer disturbed by his lamentations."
The enchantress went immediately out of the Palace of Tears. She took a cup of water and pronounced some words over it, which caused it to boil, as if it had been on the fire. She afterward proceeded to the young king and threw the water upon him, saying, "If the Creator of all things did form thee as thou art at present, or if he be angry with thee, do not change. But if thou art in that condition merely by virtue of my enchantments, resume thy natural shape, and become what thou wast before." She had scarcely spoken these words when the prince, finding himself restored to his former condition, rose up and returned thanks to God. The enchantress then said to him, "Get thee from this castle, and never return on pain of death." The young king, yielding to necessity, went away without replying a word, and retired to a remote place, where he patiently awaited the event of the design which the Sultan had so happily begun. Meanwhile the enchantress returned to the Palace of Tears, and, supposing that she still spoke to the black, said, "Dear love, I have done what you required. Nothing now prevents your rising and giving me the satisfaction of which I have so long been deprived." The Sultan, still counterfeiting the pronunciation of the black, said, "What you have now done is by no means sufficient for my cure. You have only removed a part of the evil. You must cut it up by the root." "My lovely black," resumed the Queen, "what do you mean by the root?"
"Wretched woman," replied the Sultan, "understand you not that I allude to the town and its inhabitants and the 4 islands destroyed by thy enchantments? The fish every night at midnight raise their heads out of the lake, and cry for vengeance against thee and me. This is the true cause of the delay of my cure. Go speedily, restore things to their former state, and at thy return I will give thee my hand, and thou shalt help me to arise." The enchantress, inspired with hope from these words, cried out in a transport of joy, "My heart, my soul, you shall soon be restored to your health, for I will immediately do as you command me." Accordingly she went that instant, and when she came to the brink of the lake she took a little water in her hand, and sprinkling it, she pronounced some words over the fish and the lake, and the city was immediately restored. The fish became men, women, and children, Mohammedans, Christians, Persians, or Jews, free men or slaves as they were before, every one having recovered his natural form. The houses and shops were immediately filled with their inhabitants, who found all things as they were before the enchantment. The Sultan's numerous retinue, who found themselves encamped in the largest square, were astonished to see themselves in an instant in the middle of a large, handsome, well-peopled city. To return to the enchantress. As soon as she had effected this wonderful change, she returned with all expedition to the Palace of Tears, that she might receive her reward. "My dear lord," cried she as she entered, "I have done all that you required of me. Then pray rise and give me your hand." "Come near," said the Sultan, still counterfeiting the pronunciation of the black. She did so. "You are not near enough," he continued. "Approach nearer." She obeyed. He then rose up, and seizing her by the arm so suddenly that she had not time to discover him, he, with a blow of his scimitar, cut her in 2, so that one half fell one way and the other another. This done, he left the body on the spot, and going out of the Palace of Tears, went to seek the young King of the Black Isles, who waited for him with great impatience. When he found him, "Prince," said he, embracing him, Rejoice. You have now nothing to fear. Your cruel enemy is dead." The young prince returned thanks to the Sultan in a manner that sufficiently evinced his gratitude, and in return wished him long life and happiness. "You may henceforward," said the Sultan, "dwell peaceably in your capital, unless you will accompany me to mine, which is near. You shall there be welcome, and have as much honor shown you as if you were in your own kingdom." "Potent monarch, to whom I am so much indebted," replied the king. "You think, then, that you are near your capital?" "Yes," said the Sultan. "I know it is not above 4 or 5 hours' journey." "It will take you a whole year to return," said the prince. "I do indeed believe that you came hither from your capital in the time you mention, because mine was enchanted. But since the enchantment is taken off, things are changed. However, this shall not prevent my following you, were it to the utmost corners of the earth. You are my deliverer, and that I may give you proofs of my acknowledgment of this during my whole life, I am willing to accompany you, and to leave my kingdom without regret." The Sultan was extremely surprised to understand that he was so far from his dominions, and could not imagine how it could be. But the young king of the Black Islands convinced him beyond a possibility of doubt. Then the Sultan replied, "It is no matter. The trouble of returning to my own country is sufficiently recompensed by the satisfaction of having obliged you, and by acquiring you for a son. For since you will do me the honor to accompany me, as I have no child, I look upon you as such, and from this moment appoint you my heir and successor." The young prince then employed himself in making preparations for his journey, which were finished in 3 weeks, to the great regret of his court and subjects, who agreed to receive at his hands one of his nearest kindred for their monarch. At length the Sultan and the young prince began their journey, with 100 camels laden with inestimable riches from the treasury, followed by 50 handsome gentlemen on horseback, perfectly well mounted and dressed. They had a pleasant journey, and when the Sultan, who had sent couriers to give advice of his delay, and of the adventure which had occasioned it, approached his capital, the principal officers came to receive him, and to assure him that his long absence had occasioned no alteration in his empire. The inhabitants also came out in great crowds, received him with acclamations, and made public rejoicings for several days. The day after his arrival, the Sultan acquainted his courtiers with his adoption of the king of the 4 Black Islands, who was willing to leave a great kingdom to accompany and live with him, and in reward for their loyalty he made each of them presents according to their rank. As for the fisherman, as he was the first cause of the deliverance of the young prince, the Sultan gave him a plentiful fortune, which made him and his family happy the rest of his days. The Story of Gulnar of the Sea. There was in olden time, and in an ancient age and period in the land of the Persians, a king named Shahzaman, and the place of his residence was Khorasan. He had not been blessed during his whole life with a male child nor a female, and he reflected upon this one day, and lamented that the greater portion of his life had passed, and he had no heir to take the kingdom after him, as he had inherited it from his fathers and forefathers. So the utmost grief befell him on this account. Now while he was sitting one day, one of his Mamelukes came in to him and said to him, "O my lord, at the door is a slave girl with a merchant, none more beautiful than she hath been seen." And he replied, "Bring to me the merchant and the slave girl." The merchant and the slave girl therefore came to him, and when he saw her, he found her to resemble the lance in straightness and slenderness. She was wrapped in a garment of silk embroidered with gold, and the merchant uncovered her face, whereupon the place was illuminated by her beauty, and there hung down from her forehead 7 locks of hair reaching to her anklets. The king therefore wondered at the sight of her, and at her beauty, and her stature, and justness of form. And he said to the merchant, "O sheikh, for how much is this damsel to be sold?" The merchant answered, "O my lord, I purchased her for 2,000 pieces of gold of the merchant who owned her before me, and I have been for 3 years travelling with her, and she hath cost to the period of her arrival at this place 3,000 pieces of gold, and she is a present from me unto thee." Upon this the king conferred upon him a magnificent robe of honour, and gave orders to present him with 10,000 pieces of gold. So he took them and kissed the hands of the king, thanking him for his beneficence, and departed. Then the king committed the damsel to the tire-women, saying to them, "Amend the state of this damsel, and deck her, and furnish for her a private chamber, and take her into it." He also gave orders to his chamberlains that everything which she required should be conveyed to her. The seat of government where he resided was on the shore of the sea, and his city was called the White City. And they conducted the damsel into a private chamber, which chamber had windows overlooking the sea, and the king commanded his chamberlains to close all the doors upon her after taking to her all that she required. The king then went in to visit the damsel, but she rose not to him, nor took any notice of him. So the king said, "It seemeth that she hath been with people who have not taught her good manners." And looking at the damsel, he saw her to be a person surpassing in loveliness. Her face was like the disk of the moon at the full, or the shining sun in the clear sky, and he wondered at her beauty, extolling the perfection of God the Creator. Then the king advanced to the damsel, and seated himself by her side, pressed her to his bosom, and kissed her lips, which he found to be sweeter than honey. After this he gave orders to bring tables of the richest viands, comprising dishes of every kind, and he ate and put morsels into her mouth until she was satisfied, but she spoke not a single word. The king talked to her, and inquired of her name, but she was silent, not uttering a word, nor returning him an answer, ceasing not to hang down her head toward the ground. And what protected her from the anger of the king was her beauty, and her tenderness of manner. So the king said within himself, "Extolled be the perfection of God, the Creator of this damsel. How elegant is she, saving that she doth not speak." Then the king asked the female slaves whether she had spoken, and they answered him, "From the time of her arrival to the present moment she hath not spoken one word, and we have not heard her talk." The king therefore caused some of them to come and sing to her, and make merry with her, thinking that then she might perhaps speak. Accordingly the female slaves played before her with all kinds of musical instruments, and enacted sports and other performances, and they sang so that every one who was present was moved with delight, except the damsel, who looked at them and was silent, neither laughing nor speaking. So the heart of the king was contracted. He, however, inclined to her entirely, paying no regard to others, but relinquishing all the rest of his favourites. He remained with her a whole year, which seemed as one day, and still she spoke not. And he said to her one day, when his passion was excessive, "O desire of souls, verily the love that I have for thee is great, and I have relinquished for thy sake all my worldly portion, and been patient with thee a whole year. I beg to God that he will in his grace soften thy heart toward me, and that thou mayest speak to me. Or if thou be dumb, inform me by a sign, that I may give up hope of thy speaking. I also beg of God that he will bless thee with a son, that may inherit my kingdom after me. For I am solitary, having none to be my heir, and my age hath become great. I conjure thee then, by Allah, if thou love me, that thou return me a reply." And upon this the damsel hung her head toward the ground, meditating. Then she raised her head, and smiled in the face of the king, whereat it appeared to the king that lightning filled the private chamber, and she said, "O magnanimous king, God hath answered thy prayer, for I am about to bring thee a child, and the time is almost come. And were it not that I knew this thing, I had not spoken to thee one word." And when the king heard what she said, his face brightened up with happiness, and he kissed her hands by reason of the violence of his joy, and said, "Praise be to God, who hath favoured me with things that I desired.
the first thy speaking, and the second thy information that thou art about to bring me a child." Then the king arose and went forth from her, and seated himself upon the throne of his kingdom in a state of exceeding happiness. And he ordered the vizier to give out to the poor and the needy 100,000 pieces of gold, as a thank-offering to God. So the vizier did as the king had commanded him. And after that the king went into the damsel and embraced her, saying to her, "O my mistress, wherefore hath been this silence, seeing that thou hast been with me a whole year, awake and asleep, yet hast not spoken to me except on this day?" The damsel answered, "Hear, O king of the age, and know that I am a poor person, a stranger, broken-hearted. I have become separated from my mother and my family and my brother." And when the king heard her words, he knew her desire, and he replied, "As to thy saying that thou art poor, there is no occasion for such an assertion, for all my kingdom and possessions are at thy service. And as to thy saying, I have become separated from my mother and my family and my brother, inform me in what place they are, and I will send to them and bring them to thee." So she said to him, "Know, O king, that my name is Gulnar, pomegranate flower, of the sea. My father was one of the kings of the sea, and he died and left to us the kingdom. But while we were enjoying it, another of the kings came upon us and took the kingdom from our hands. I have also a brother named Saleh, and my mother is of the women of the sea, and I have quarrelled with my brother and swore that I would throw myself into the hands of a man of the inhabitants of the land. Accordingly I came forth from the sea and sat upon the shore of an island in the moonlight, and there passed by a man who took me and sold me to this man from whom thou tookest me. And he was an excellent virtuous man, a person of religion and fidelity and kindness. But had not thy heart loved me, and hadst thou not preferred me above all thy wives, I had not remained with thee 1 hour. For I should have cast myself into the sea from this window, and gone to my mother and my people. I was ashamed, however, to go to them, for they would imagine evil of me, and would not believe me, even though I should swear to them, were I to tell them that a king had purchased me with his money, and chosen me in preference to his other wives and all that his right hand possessed. This is my story, and peace be on thee." And when he heard her words, he thanked her, and kissed her between the eyes, and said to her, "By Allah, O my mistress and light of my eyes, I cannot endure separation from thee for 1 hour, and if thou quit me I shall die instantly. How then shall the affair be?" She answered, "O my master, the time of the birth is near, and my family must come." "And how," said the king, "do they walk in the sea without being wetted?" She answered, "We walk in the sea as ye walk upon the land, through the influence of the names engraved upon the seal of Solomon, the son of David, upon both of whom be peace. But, O king, when my family and my brethren come, I will inform them that thou boughtest me with thy money, and hast treated me with beneficence, and it will be meet that thou confirm my assertion to them. They will also see thy state with their eyes, and will know that thou art a king, the son of a king." And thereupon the king said, "O my mistress, do what seemeth fit to thee, and what thou wishest, for I will comply with thy desire in all that thou wilt do." And the damsel said, "Know, O king of the age, that we walk in the sea with our eyes open, and see what is in it, and we see the sun and the moon and the stars and the sky as on the face of the earth, and this hurteth us not. Know also that in the sea are many peoples and various forms of all the kinds that are on the land. And know, moreover, that all that is on the land, in comparison with what is in the sea, is a very small matter." And the king wondered at her words. Then the damsel took a bit of aloes wood, and having lighted a fire in a perfuming vessel, threw into it that bit, and she proceeded to speak words which no one understood, whereupon a great smoke arose while the king looked on. After this she said to the king, "O my lord,
Arise and conceal thyself in a closet, that I may show thee my brother and my mother and my family without their seeing thee. For I desire to bring them, and thou shalt see in this place at this time a wonder, and shalt marvel at the various shapes and strange forms that God hath created." So the king arose immediately and entered a closet, and looked to see what she would do. And she proceeded to burn perfume and repeat spells until the sea foamed and was agitated, and there came forth from it a young man of comely form, of beautiful countenance, like the moon at the full, with shining forehead and red cheeks, and hair resembling pearls and jewels. He was of all the creation the most like to his sister, and the tongue of the case itself seemed to recite in his praise these verses: "The moon becometh perfect once in each month, but the loveliness of thy face is perfect every day. Its abode is in the heart of one sign at a time, but thine abode is in all hearts at once." Afterward there came forth from the sea a grizzly-haired old woman, and with her 5 damsels, resembling moons and bearing a likeness to the damsel whose name was Gulnar. Then the king saw the young man and the old woman and the damsels walk upon the surface of the water until they came to Gulnar. And when they drew near to the window and she beheld them, she rose to them and met them with joy. On their seeing her they knew her, and they went in to her and embraced her, weeping violently. And they said to her, "O Gulnar, how is it that thou leavest us for 4 years, and we know not the place in which thou art? By Allah, we had no delight in food nor in drink a single day, weeping night and day on account of the excess of our longing to see thee." Then the damsel began to kiss the hand of her brother and the hand of her mother, and so also the hands of the daughters of her uncle, and they sat with her a while, asking her respecting her state, and the things that had happened to her, and her present condition. So she said to them, "Know ye, that when I quitted you and came forth from the sea, I sat upon the shore of an island, and a man took me and sold me to a merchant, and the merchant brought me to this city, and sold me to its king for 10,000 pieces of gold. Then he treated me with attention and forsook all his favourites for my sake, and was diverted by his regard for me from everything that he possessed, and what was in his city." And when her brother heard her words, he said, "Praise be to God who hath reunited us. But it is my desire, O my sister, that thou wouldst arise and go with us to our country and our family." So when the king heard the words of her brother, his reason fled in consequence of his fear lest the damsel should accept the proposal of her kindred, and he could not prevent her, though he was inflamed with love of her. Wherefore he became perplexed in violent fear of her separation. But as to the damsel Gulnar, on hearing the words of her brother, she said, "By Allah, O my brother, the man who purchased me is the king of this city, and he is a great king, and a man of wisdom, generous, of the utmost liberality. He hath treated me with honour, and he is a person of kindness and of great wealth, but hath no male child nor a female. He hath shown me favour too, and acted well to me in every respect, and from the day when I came to him to the present time, I have not heard from him a word to grieve my heart, but he hath not ceased to treat me with courtesy, and I am living with him in the most perfect of enjoyments. Moreover, if I quitted him, he would perish, for he can never endure my separation even for a single hour. I also, if I quitted him, should die of my love for him in consequence of his kindness to me during the period of my residence with him. For if my father were living, my condition with him would not be like my condition with this great glorious king. God, whose name be exalted, afflicted me not, but compensated me well. And as the king hath not a male child nor a female, I beg God to bless me with a son that may inherit of this great king these palaces and possessions." And when her brother and the daughters of her uncle heard her words, their eyes became cheerful thereat, and they said to her, "O Gulnar, thou art acquainted with our affection for thee, and thou art assured that thou art the dearest of all persons to us, and art certain that we desire for thee comfort without trouble or toil. Therefore, if thou be not in a state of comfort, arise and accompany us to our country and our family. But if thou be comfortable here in honour and happiness, this is our desire and wish." And Gulnar replied, "By Allah, I am in a state of the utmost enjoyment, in honour and desirable happiness." So when the king heard these words from her, he rejoiced, and he thanked her for them. His love for her penetrated to his heart's core, and he knew that she loved him as he loved her, and that she desired to remain with him, to see his child which she was to bring to him. Then the damsel Gulnar of the sea gave orders to the female slaves to bring forward viands of all kinds, and Gulnar herself was the person who superintended the preparation of the viands in the kitchen. So the female slaves brought to them the viands and the sweetmeats and the fruits, and she ate with her family. But afterward they said to her, "O Gulnar, thy master is a man who is a stranger to us, and we have entered his abode without his permission, and thou praisest to us his excellence, and hast also brought to us his food, and we have eaten, but have not seen him. Nor hath he seen us, nor come into our presence, nor eaten with us, that the bond of bread and salt might be established between us." And they all desisted from eating, and were enraged at her, and fire began to issue from their mouths, as from cressets. So when the king beheld this, his reason fled, in consequence of the violence of his fear of them. Then Gulnar rose to them and soothed their hearts, after which she walked along until she entered the closet in which was the king her master, and she said to him, "O my master, didst thou see and didst thou hear my thanks to thee, and my praise of thee in the presence of my family? And didst thou hear what they said to me, that they desired to take me with them to our family and our country?" The king answered her, "I heard and saw. May God recompense thee. By Allah, I knew not the extent of the love that thou feelest for me until this blessed hour." She replied, "O my master, is the recompense of beneficence aught but beneficence? How then could my heart be happy to quit thee and to depart from thee? Now I desire of thy goodness that thou come and salute my family, that they may see thee, and that pleasure and mutual friendship may ensue. For know, O king, that my brother and my mother and the daughters of my uncle have conceived a great love for thee in consequence of my praising thee to them, and they have said, We will not depart from thee to our country until we have an interview with the king and salute him." And the king said to her, "I hear and obey, for this is what I desire." He then rose from his place and went to them and saluted them with the best salutation, and they hastened to rise to him. They met him in the most polite manner, and he sat with them in the pavilion, ate with them at the table, and remained with them for a period of 30 days. Then they desired to return to their country and abode. So they took leave of the king and Queen Gulnar of the sea, and departed from them after the king had treated them with the utmost honour. After this Gulnar gave birth to a boy, resembling the moon at the full, whereat the king experienced the utmost happiness, because he had not before been blessed with a son nor a daughter during his life. They continued the rejoicings and the decoration of the city for a period of 7 days, in the utmost happiness and enjoyment. And on the 7th day, the mother of Gulnar and her brother and the daughters of her uncle all came, when they knew that she had given birth to her child. The king met them, rejoicing at their arrival, and said to them, "I said that I would not name my son until ye should come, and that ye should name him according to your knowledge." And they named him Bedr Besim, smiling full moon, all of them agreeing as to this name. They then presented the boy to his maternal uncle, Saleh, who took him upon his hands, and rising with him from among them, walked about the palace to the right and left, after which he went forth with him from the palace, descended with him to the sea, and walked on until he became concealed from the eye of the king. So when the king saw that he had taken his son and disappeared from him at the bottom of the sea, he despaired of him, and began to weep and wail. But Gulnar, seeing him in this state, said to him, "O king of the age, fear not nor grieve for thy son, for I love my child more than thou. and my child is with my brother. Therefore fear not his being drowned. If my brother knew that any injury would betide the little one, he had not done what he hath done. And presently he will bring thee thy son safe, if it be the will of God, whose name be exalted. And but a short time had elapsed, when the sea was agitated, and the uncle of the little one came forth from it, having with him the king's son safe. And he flew from the sea until he came to them, with the little one in his arms, silent, and his face resembling the moon in the night of its fullness. Then the uncle of the little one looked toward the king, and said to him, Perhaps thou fearedst some injury to thy son, when I descended into the sea, having him with me. So he replied, Yes, O my master, I feared for him, and I did not imagine that he would ever come forth from it safe. And Saleh said to him, O king of the land, we applied to his eyes a lotion that we know, and repeated over him the names engraved upon the seal of Solomon, the son of David. For when a child is born among us, we do to him as I have told thee. Fear not therefore on his account drowning, nor suffocation, nor all the seas if he descend into them. Like as ye walk upon the land, we walk in the sea. He then took forth from his pocket a case, written upon and sealed, and he broke its seal and scattered its contents, whereupon there fell from it strung jewels, consisting of all kinds of jacinths and other gems, together with 300 oblong emeralds, and 300 oblong large jewels of the size of the eggs of the ostrich, the light of which was more resplendent than the light of the sun and the moon. And he said, O king of the age, these jewels and jacinths are a present from me unto thee, for we never brought thee a present, because we knew not the place of Gulnaar's abode. So when we saw thee to have become united to her, and that we all had become one, we brought thee this present, and after every period of a few days we will bring thee the like of it. For these jewels and jacinths with us are more plentiful than the gravel upon the land, and we know the excellent among them and the bad, and the places where they are found, and they are of easy access to us. And when the king looked at those jewels, his reason was confounded, and his mind was bewildered, and he said, By Allah, one of these jewels is worth my kingdom. Then the king thanked Saleh of the sea for his generosity, and looking toward the Queen Gulnar, said to her, I am abashed at thy brother, for he hath shown favour to me and presented me with this magnificent present which the people of the earth would fail to procure. So Gulnar thanked her brother for that which he had done, but her brother said, O king of the age, to thank thee hath been incumbent on us, for thou hast treated my sister with beneficence, and we have entered thine abode and eaten of thy provision. Then Saleh said, If we stood serving thee, O king of the age, 1,000 years regarding nothing else, we could not requite thee, and our doing so would be but a small thing in comparison with thy desert. And Saleh remained with the king, he and his mother and the daughters of his uncle, 40 days, after which he arose and kissed the ground before the king, the husband of his sister. So the king said to him, What dost thou desire, O Saleh? And he answered, O king of the age, we desire of thy goodness that thou wouldst give us permission to depart, for we have become desirous of seeing again our family and our country, and our relations and our homes. We will not, however, relinquish the service of thee, nor that of my sister, nor the son of my sister. And by Allah, O king of the age, to quit you is not pleasant to my heart. But how can we act, when we have been reared in the sea, and the land is not agreeable to us? So when the king heard his words, he rose upon his feet and bade farewell to Saleh of the sea and his mother and the daughters of his uncle, and they wept together on account of the separation. Then they said to the king, We will never relinquish you, but after every period of a few days we will visit you. And after this they flew toward the sea, and descended into it, and disappeared. The king treated Gulnar with beneficence, and honoured her exceedingly, and the little one grew up well, and his maternal uncle, with his grandmother and the daughters of his uncle, after every period of a few days, used to come to the residence of the king, and to remain with him a month, and then return to their places. The boy ceased not to increase in beauty and loveliness until his age became 15 years, and he was incomparable in his perfect beauty, and his stature and his justness of form. He had learned writing and reading, and history and grammar and philology and archery, and he learned to play with the spear, and he also learned horsemanship, and all that the sons of the kings required. There was not one of the children of the inhabitants of the city, men and women, that talked not of the charms of that young man, for he was of surpassing loveliness and perfection, and the king loved him greatly. Then the king summoned the vizier and the emirs, and the lords of the empire, and the great men of the kingdom, and made them swear by binding oaths that they would make Bedr Besim king over them after his father. So they swore to him by binding oaths, and rejoiced thereat, and the king himself was beneficent to the people, courteous in speech, and of auspicious aspect. And on the following day the king mounted, together with the lords of the empire, and all the emirs, and all the soldiers, and they ceased not to proceed until they arrived at the vestibule of the palace, the king's son riding. Thereupon he alighted, and his father embraced him, he and the emirs, and they seated him upon the throne of the kingdom, while his father stood, as also did the emirs before him. Then Bedr Besim judged the people, displaced the tyrannical, and invested the just, and continued to give judgment until near midday, when he rose from the throne of the kingdom and went in to his mother, Gulnar of the sea, having upon his head the crown, and resembling the moon. So when his mother saw him and the king before him, she rose to him and kissed him, and congratulated him on his elevation to the dignity of sultan. And she offered up a prayer in favor of him and his father for length of life and victory over their enemies. He then sat with his mother and rested, and when the time of afternoon prayers arrived, he rode with the emirs before him until he came to the horse-course, where he played with arms till the time of nightfall, together with his father and the lords of his empire, after which he returned to the palace with all the people before him. Every day he used to ride to the horse-course, and when he returned, he sat to judge the people, and administered justice between the emir and the poor man. He ceased not to do thus for a whole year, and after that he used to ride to the chase, and go about through the cities and provinces that were under his rule, making proclamation of safety and security, and doing as do the kings. And he was incomparable among the people of his age in glory and courage, and in justice to the people. Now it came to pass that the old king, the father of Bedr Besim, fell sick one day, whereupon his heart throbbed, and he felt that he was about to be removed to the mansion of eternity. Then his malady increased, so that he was at the point of death. He therefore summoned his son, and charged him to take care of his subjects and his mother, and all the lords of his empire, and all the dependents. He also made them swear, and covenanted with them a second time that they would obey his son, and he confided in their oaths. And after this he remained a few days, and was admitted to the mercy of God, whose name be exalted. His son Bedr Besim and his wife Gulnar and the emirs and viziers and the lords of the empire mourned over him, and they made for him a tomb, and buried him in it, and continued the ceremonies of mourning for him a whole month. Saleh, the brother of Gulnar, and her mother, and the daughters of her uncle also came, and consoled them for the loss of the king. They said, "O Gulnar, if the king hath died, he hath left this ingenuous youth, and he who hath left such as he is hath not died. This is he who hath not an equal, the crushing lion and the splendid moon." Then the lords of the empire and the grandees went in to the king Bedr Besim, and said to him, "O king, there is no harm in mourning for the king, but mourning becometh not any save women, Therefore trouble not thy heart and ours by mourning for thy father, for he hath died and left thee, and he who hath left such as thou art hath not died." They proceeded to address him with soft words, and to console him, and after that they conducted him into the bath. And when he came forth from the bath, he put on a magnificent suit, woven of gold, adorned with jewels and jacinths, and he put the royal crown upon his head, seated himself upon the throne of his kingdom, and performed the affairs of the people, deciding equitably between the strong and the weak, and exacting for the poor man his due from the emir, wherefore the people loved him exceedingly. Thus he continued to do for the space of a whole year, and after every short period his family of the sea visited him. So his life was pleasant, and his eye was cheerful, and he ceased not to live in this state until he was visited by the terminator of delights and the separator of companions. This is the end of their story. The mercy of God be on them all.